Welcome, Baylor World, for a very special celebration. I'm your host, Shaack Deusen. I am the ghost of Baylor past, 1961. And my two special friends here are on my far right, the ghost of Baylor present, Scott Wilson, our current headmaster. And here in the center is the ghost of Baylor future, the headmaster to come, Chris Angel. Guys, I would like to start this way. This is the only formal part of, I think, what's going to be very informal, is a biographical sketch of you as an educator, as a scholar from the past. So starting with Baylor, just run through your biography, Scott.
Thanks, Shaack. And I think what you're going to hear some pretty common threads in our history. Chris and I talk about that a lot. But I attended Baylor from 1969 to 1975, so all 6 years, which was all you could do as a day student at the time. And I probably needed a seventh year if that had been available then. But so graduated with a great class of 1975, and proud of many of my classmates who serve and support Baylor to this day in a great way. Went to the University of Georgia after Baylor, ultimately graduated with a history degree, and it took me an extra year, so I graduated in 1980. And then I worked for a year at the University of Georgia before coming back to Baylor in 1981 to work with Jimmy Duke in the admissions office. I got to teach for a short while. I coached basketball for the better part of the decade of the 80s with Austin Clark. And then left, went to Hammond School in Columbia, South Carolina for 7 years with Dr. Barks, and was director of admissions and development there at the beginning, became the upper school head, and the better part of my time there, I was also the varsity boys basketball coach. And 1997, left Hammond, became headmaster of Valwood School in Valdosta, Georgia. I was there 6 years. Then went to Brookstone School in Columbus, Georgia, and I was there 6 years. And then in 2009, had the privilege of coming back to Baylor as headmaster. I got a master's degree in educational leadership when I was in Columbia from the University of South Carolina. And I did a fellowship at Columbia University, a Klingenstein Fellowship at Columbia University in 2006. And so we have that in common as well. Maybe there'll be some other common threads that you'll hear in a second. So that's kind of my profile.
Okay, Chris?
Thanks, Shaack. I appreciate you moderating this. And there are, listening to you, Scott, it reminds me there are even some more similar parallel path moments that we've had along the way that I didn't even realize. I attended Baylor from 7th through 12th, as did Scott. I began in 1983, coming here from Bright School. I graduated in the class of 1989, went to the University of Georgia from 89 to 93, then returned to my alma mater to teach and coach. I majored in biology and minored in chemistry at the University of Georgia. And I thought I was going to come and teach here for 1 year before going to medical school. Doug Hale at the time had invited me and encouraged me all along, really, to become a teacher. And so I did that, returned, moved into Lupton Hall, second floor, surrounded by a number of 9th and 10th grade boarders. I was teaching biology and chemistry. I was coaching football and track and living in the dormitory, being a dorm parent. After doing that for 3 years, Doug Hale again called me into his office and said, Chris, love what you're doing, and I would love for you to consider an administrative role. And at that point, it was called the Dean of the 11th and 12th grade. He asked me if I'd be willing to do that. He said, there's only one catch. And I was like, okay, what is that? And he's like, I'm not going to be here next year. and so I was disappointed, of course. Doug was my 7th grade English teacher, and had a good connection with him, in addition to many others that you'll hear throughout this conversation. So I decided to do that. I kept the class, and then for the next 5 years, continued to teach and live on campus and be the Dean of the 11th, 12th grades at Baylor. I'd always had a really close connection with Herb Barks, and I'm assuming we'll have a lot of conversation about Herb Barks today.
Save it. It's coming
So,
up.
yes, so I'll save that. But at one point, he had asked me, or at many points, he asked me to come and visit him in Columbia at a school where I'd heard about because of the Hammond-Baylor connection, but I'd never been. And so I finally went to visit him. And once I stepped onto the campus with him, it just reignited a lot of the relationship that we had had. And so I ended up going there in the fall of 2002. And I've been there ever since. I started there as the head of the upper school. And then I'm just finishing my 12th year as headmaster there. So, and along the way, like Scott, you asked about education. I got a master's degree in educational leadership from Columbia University through the Klingenstein Center in New York. And so spent time there and really enjoyed that and had a great cohort of people that I've enjoyed remaining in contact with since then. And so 18 years, beginning my 19th year at Hammond, and just completely honored to be coming back to our alma mater to take over a year from now when Scott transitions out.
Just one footnote.
Yes.
Who's taking your place at Hammond?
Great question. So, continuing the Baylor connection to Hammond, one of my advisees from when I was at Baylor, who is now the current middle school head at Hammond, his name was Andrew North, now goes by Andy North, as Baylor alum who is taking over as the headmaster of Hammond when I leave. So we're keeping that Hammond-Baylor connection
There you go.
In full
It's an amazing
relationship
story.
there.
It really is.
Thank you.
At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Scott because his enthusiasm is so contagious, but he wants to say something directly to the donors to the Baylor Fund.
Well, thank you, Shaack. Here's what I would say. We have just set an all-time annual giving record to the Baylor Fund, and to have done that during COVID-19 when the world is upside down and many folks are strapped, frankly, and the future isn't all that clear for so many. And it was a time of need, quite frankly, for Baylor, and the Baylor family stepped up. And so we blew by our goal, almost raised $2.5 million for the Baylor Fund this year. And what I want to say to our donors is, from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of everybody at Baylor School, thank you, because it's going to make a big difference this year. It will help us be the great school we've always been and not miss a beat because of your generosity. So I wanted to say, on behalf of everyone at Baylor, thank you, and go Big Red.
And we'll, 3 generations of Baylor grads want to thank you, donors. It's an amazing occurrence. Amazing. That's all the heavy stuff. Now we turn to the Red Raider quiz.
Uh-oh.
Now, guys, this has to be one word or very brief. And I know you're both administrators and it's hard to be brief. But let's keep it brief.
Okay.
One word. I'll start with the elder, with Scott, and then Chris, you answer. One word that describes Baylor for you.
Jeez. For me, it would be love.
Okay. Did he steal your word?
Yes, I was going to say love, and I'll expand that to passion.
What about the word I never can pronounce? Magnanimitas.
Magnanimitas.
It's on the gate.
Magnanimitas, greatness of spirit. And I think that embodies so much of what we're about today and what Chris is going to come back and feel, you know, the first moment he's on campus. But greatness of spirit, Dr. Barks's, you know, admonition to all of us to live that way. And that's another, if it weren't love, it would be greatness of spirit.
Now this has got to be brief, okay?
Okay.
Your favorite Baylor tradition?
Oh, wow, that's so hard. Baylor McCauley. I got a lot of favorites, but Baylor McCauley.
It's special.
It's special and fun, and usually red.
Yes.
That's right.
That's the first thing that popped into my mind as well. But it not just, I think a lot of people, when they think Baylor-McCallie, it's Baylor-McCallie, the football game. I was just sharing a story about wrestling. But really, anytime competition comes into play, whether it's watching a Baylor-McCallie wrestling match or any athletic competition, but it's also, I remember times when I look back on my experience, like those moments of being in the classroom. I'll tell a story on Shaack in a minute that is a favorite of mine from a classroom. But I think it's really impossible. You said to keep it brief. I can't do it. When you start thinking about all those Baylor moments and those favorites, just watching the sunrise over the Tennessee River, watching students hugging after a victory or crying together after a defeat. It's just growing up together, it's family, it's love. Also, when I was here, a lot of Matt Victoria Curum, right? Victory loves care. I remember that vividly with the relationships that I have. It's all about, I think life is about relationships, and I think about my Baylor experience, and I'm looking at this stunning scenery, but most importantly to me, it's the people that I met and I grew up with, and including all the adults on this campus that I love so much. And I think that's what it means to me.
There was a tradition that was introduced to me by my students. About the last 10 years of my life directing plays at Baylor, we always met just like a coach meets the team before they go on stage. We always met and went over a few last-minute notes, and we did some warm-up exercises and all of that. And they started singing Alma Mater.
We started really doing that in 2009 every moment we could, and the kids just totally were swept up with that, and now they own it.
Now here's an impossible one. Impossible. And it only get one word, and I'm going to return to the subject. So
you can start with him if you'd like.
Okay, I'll let Chris have it.
Okay.
One word that describes Herb Barks. Herb Barks Jr. I knew Herb Barks Sr.
Can I hyphenate the word?
Yes, you can hyphenate the word.
I would say spirited love, spirited passion.
That's it?
Sorry.
Nope. That's
Okay.
all you get. Because we're coming back to it.
Yeah, okay.
Scott?
One word, visionary.
Ooh, that's why we have those art buildings down there,
Yeah.
among other
There's
things.
no end to that.
Now, you don't get to talk about Herb Barks yet, because you both have that in common. We all three. He hired me,
Right.
so I owe him something. Who are your other mentors in your life at Baylor?
That's good.
I'll start with the one who directed me, who helped me make the decision to attend Baylor, and that was Jimmy Duke. And I've told this story a number of times, but short version, I was dropped off late on the Bright School Visits Baylor Day, and the tours were already out, and so Jimmy Duke gave me a private tour and showed me
That's
around,
Jimmy Duke.
and left that day and said, I'm going to Baylor. And ended up working with him in the admissions office in summers. I also then came back, and when I moved into Lupton, what I didn't say was I moved into his old apartment. And I was with him the day he died, and that was a powerful day for a lot of us here. But Jimmy Duke certainly one for me. And then maybe I'll let you go, and I'll ping pong back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, so I'll start with Coach Duke too. Played basketball for Coach Duke at Baylor, and then he hired me to come to Baylor and work in the admissions office with him, and I did that from 1981 to 1987 when he died. And I talked to him the day he died. He did not want me to come over. He said, "You stay at Baylor and hold down the fort. We'll be all good here." But he showed a lot of people what loving kids was all about. I'll piggyback on Chris.
I'll add to it. I briefly mentioned Doug Hale before, but Doug Hale really was the person that hired me originally at Baylor, and I believe saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and he really encouraged me to take that next step from an administrative standpoint, and really believed in me, and I'm grateful to him to this day.
Doug means a lot to me too, but and I love you, Doug. But Bill Cushman, I would say, was probably the most influential teacher maybe in my life, including college. He got the best out of me as a student, and I've loved sustaining a long relationship with Mr. Cushman forever. He taught me how to love learning. So Bill Cushman is special to me.
Great choice.
I would say this.
I'm going to give you 3 each. That's it. Because
That's
I know
good.
this list could go on forever.
It could. Well, I'm gonna include a teacher then, who happens to be sitting right next to me, Shaack Van Deusen. I only had one teacher in my entire Baylor career twice, and it was Shaack Van Deusen, and that wasn't accidental on my part. So Shaack taught me English. A lot of people know him in the theater, and I was never in the theater. I wish I had been, looking back on it now.
I wish I'd recruited you.
But I look back on my experience. You taught me sophomore English, and I have this image of Shaack standing on these old tables with a coffee in one hand, cigarette kind of dangling out of his mouth, and reading, passionately Shakespeare and whatever we happen to be reading. It made such a huge impact on me. I ended up majoring in science later on, but I always had passion, and I feel like you helped instill that in me, and I'm always grateful. So much so that I probably worked the system a little more than I should have, but I finagled my way to have you as my senior English teacher as well. And I look back on that as a powerful moment, so I'm grateful. So I'm really grateful. When I heard you were going to be able to do this moderating with us today, I was grateful that
I'll
I could
pull out
say
my wallet
thank you.
later.
So,
Okay.
No, I mean it. I mean it. So thank you.
Last one, Scott.
Well, I'd have to say Austin Clark. I was a young, fairly immature person when I started working at Baylor back in the 80s, and went through a little bit of a tough time in my life. And Austin was always there to kind of be that big brother to me. He's been a great friend since the early 80s, and he remains that today. And he's someone I trust and someone I look up to and admire. He's still coaching me up, mentoring me to this day. So
Pretty intense coach.
yeah, but he is about the most tender-hearted person I've ever known. And so when you get right past that tough part, he's a wonderful, wonderful educator.
I think I can pick up on the theme both of you have been sharing, because I'm going to tell a story of my own. When I returned to Baylor in '76, Coach Worsham invited me to assist him in wrestling. I was flattered. I wasn't hired to coach,
Right.
but he asked me. We won the state the first year. We won the state the second year. We won the state the fourth year. I thought this was a piece of cake. This was really easy.
Right.
And it was fun working under Luke. The fifth year, we placed 23rd in the state. And I was disconsolate. I was confused. I was depressed. Luke puts that big arm around me. He said, Shaack, we taught them all we wanted to teach them.
Right.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's about.
That's right.
I've got a question that is an honest question. My dear friend Floyd Salapino is retiring this year. 42 years.
Yeah.
An amazing classicist, an amazing reader, amazing teacher. 42 years. But he's not alone.
Right.
Dan Kennedy, Lewis Rush,
Gene Adder.
Gene Etter.
Right.
You start naming them, and back in my day, we had teachers who'd been there forever.
Right.
Why? What is it about Baylor that guys and gals want to hang on and they don't lose their energy and their enthusiasm? What is it about Baylor that invites this longevity?
I loved what Floyd had to say in the most current edition of the Baylor magazine. He talked about how the time away from class, I mean, he talked about how great classes were with his students, but the time away from classes, lunch with colleagues who are so bright and interesting, and how much he enjoyed lunch, and that at a point, he figured out, man, I'm hanging with some pretty cool people. I'm glad you mentioned Floyd, because one of the most poignant memories I will ever have was this year when Floyd walked into my office and told me that this was going to be his last year. And we just sat there and laughed and cried, and I have so much admiration and respect for him. And I idolize you guys. When I was a young teacher here, and we would, on Friday afternoons, go down to David's. I loved being around all you guys. And Floyd is one of those just remarkable intellects and personalities and people. And it's just been a privilege to get to know him better, especially the last 12 years. He's something special. Why? I mean, I don't know. This is home, becomes home to you.
I don't think of it as a job. I think of it as a lifestyle. And I think,
and they pay you for it.
And
that's what I always thought was really weird.
I know. I have these great moments where you wake up and think, gosh, I got paid for doing this today.
There have been plenty of times I didn't, I was glad to get a paycheck.
You earned it,
Felt
right?
like I'd earned it. But
some tough days too, but the family, the community, that strong sense of the intellectual stimulation that you get, just being around people where you're having conversations at lunch that Floyd mentions is not found everywhere.
Right.
And so I think it's, you come and you want to be a part of something, and it is your home, and you do grow with people together. And I'm not surprised at all to continue to hear that you have so many lifelong faculty members. And that's because it's a great place to be.
I was here 35 years, and I'm a baby.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Short timer.
Yeah, short timer.
Yeah.
Well,
I've got a question, another question. What does this mean? Because we see it in every publication we put out there. Baylor leads. What does that mean to you?
To me, it means that this is a place that has aspirational values, and that when you go through Baylor, you can't help but take those take those values and make them part of who you are. And so honor, integrity, respect, caring for one another. I watched that happen with my own children, that the values of the school became part of who they are. And to me, that's what it means that Baylor leads. I could go on and on about how we have leading programs. And when I was a student here, we were always taught to expect the best of ourselves, the best of each other, and that we were going to win. Whether we were cleaning up the Tennessee River or playing sports, we were going to be the best at it. We had that kind of pride. But I think it goes way past that to kind of something more intrinsic. And to me, that's what Baylor Leads means.
I think of it as opportunity and excellence. I just took a Baylor admissions tour earlier today with my daughter.
I thought you were going to say an admissions test.
No, I probably don't need
He passed that a long time ago.
No, I do remember that too. But no, I took it with my current rising 8th grade daughter, who will be in 9th grade when we move back to Chattanooga in a year. And walking around, seeing so many things that have changed, but what is still at the core are those relationships and those opportunities for excellence that I think sometimes if you haven't seen other places, you might take for granted.
That's right.
And so I think it's always healthy to have perspective. And I think that perspective for me is, I was blown away with the admissions tour of Baylor. I know the school pretty well, but blown away this morning. Just with the opportunities for my daughter to have leadership opportunities from the faculty members and the programs that have been in place for years and years and years, and those that are new as well. So very impressed with what the school has.
I told you guys we would return to this subject. What did Herb Barks teach you about leadership?
He taught me, and I'm sure Chris would echo this, it's people who matter, and that seems obvious. Whomever it is in front of you at that moment is the most important person, whether it's a student, a colleague, a parent, that you honor that and treat them in a special way. And I learned that, through experience working with Dr. Barks.
I'll second that. His ability to do that was uncanny, and he in any situation, and he does that whether it's when I was at Hammond, we have 4-year-olds through 18-year-olds, and he would do that with every 4-year-old. See them, they would be sitting in his lap, and they would have his undivided attention all the way up through a senior, a teacher, a trustee, regardless. They all got the same one-on-one attention. But really, I think in addition to that, because that's certainly true in my experience, but with Dr. Barks, he really taught me in terms of leadership to push other people and how to push other people and help them understand that they can do things that they didn't think they could do, right? And with a lot of independence. And we talked a lot about putting people out of your comfort zone, right?
He'd give you a lot of rope.
He'd give you a lot of rope,
yeah.
Yes. If you were to ask any Hammond student, one of the things I'm trying to accomplish with them, they would say to push them out of their comfort zone. And literally from any of the lower schoolers all the way up through. And I learned that from Dr. Barks, just really the value of being uncomfortable.
Yep.
And I think that resonated in my Baylor experience, and it's what I try to help instill in Hammond students, and what I look forward to continuing to instill in Baylor students when I return.
He laid the foundation for what we are today, from walkabout to coeducation to integration. So many fundamental changes that have helped create the Baylor of today. But what's remarkable is he has a comparable legacy, maybe even greater at some level, at Hammond, because that school wouldn't exist if it weren't for Herb Barks. And it is one of the best schools in the South now, and it wouldn't be here but for Herb. So to have a legacy, a profound legacy in one place is pretty amazing. He has it in 2 places.
And just expanding on that, you're absolutely right. Hammond wouldn't exist without Dr. Barks. But when I think about the legacy, I think about all the individuals who are doing what they're doing, like the 2 of us, maybe you, right, because of him. And because he took a chance on all of us, and he encouraged us, and he pushed us out of our comfort zones and to continue to grow. And he did it in a very loving, caring way. But I think when I think about his legacy, I think that's you, that's me, that's Scott. So many generations of Baylor alums and Hammond alums, and certainly the institutions that he led. And really that spirited passion that I mentioned earlier, I think that's a big part of his legacy as well. A lot of what I value about what brings me back to Baylor is what I love the most about Herb.
I'll tell you what, he'd be mad at us too if we didn't use the word fun.
Dropping ping pong balls on the top of Macaulay School.
Herb made it fun now. I mean, and I think Chris and I both are big believers that if you can't have fun, then don't come to work. So he helped students learn how to love school. And Jim Stover, he captured it very well in his last remarks to the Baylor faculty some years ago about the magic of kids really wanting to be at school. My friends call me and go, my kids would rather be at Baylor than at home. And I'm going, exactly, So that's a Herb Barks legacy.
When I interviewed Herb for the job, the theater director was leaving, and I was interviewing for that job. And we talked and talked. I didn't know her. And then he said at the end, he said, "Shaack, I hear that you smoke, drink, and womanize." There was a long silence. And I said, "I'm a bachelor." And Herb laughed. He didn't pay me much. He gave me that little rope you're talking about.
That's right.
And it worked out. It worked out.
I'll say another thing about Herb. Again, we can go on for a long time. Yeah. But his global vision and his willing to think globally was unlike most anyone I've ever been around.
Yeah.
Right? And he would...
Years ahead of his time.
Years ahead of his time. And to what a lot of what he would do, he would meet somebody on an airplane, and he would know them really well by the time they landed, and then he would invite them to come speak at Baylor or Hammond afterwards. And so he had all these connections all over the world, and he helped us as Baylor students and then Hammond students think bigger, right? And to think more globally. There was no idea that was too big for her. He would always know someone or have a contact or try to find it to help make whatever your idea was happen, or whatever his idea. I remember the first time I went snorkeling with him on the reef in Belize.
Yep.
And I came up out of the water with this big grin on my face. And it was only matched by his. He was so excited. He'd been there 1,000 times.
Right.
But he was so excited for me to experience it. And that's what I think he's instilled in us too, is watching us experience the world. And so we are now doing that with our students, taking them out into the world, the value of global travel and education and seeing new environments, whether it's the underwater world or underground in caves and places all over the world.
One of my favorite pictures in a Baylor annual is a picture from the back of Luke Worsham and Randy Weinberg, Kitty Sorrow.
Yes.
And he convinced Kitty Sorrow to come back,
Yeah.
and that was an eye-opener for the kids.
Yep.
Buddhist monk.
Yep.
It was eye-opening for me. I was one of those students that
Yeah.
saw Kitty Sorrow come back. Again, in addition to all that I'd heard about Randy Weinberg, Kitty Sorrow, was valedictorian here.
National prep champion.
He was one of the best wrestlers ever in the
Yep.
history of a storied program. Just bringing all the visitors, I remember speakers in our Lyceum series as a student with all, a lot of our different artistic people from all over the world coming back and sharing their experiences. That's valuable. And
Robert Bly, Baba Olatunji, I mean, the list just goes
yes,
on and on.
It does. It
that's
does.
right.
We know Baylor's history of athletics, folks. We don't have to brag about that. We've been in the top 25 in the country many times. We know how good our athletic program is. But the newest program is in the arts. And I'd like for y'all to talk about the role the arts play now at Baylor, the future of the arts at Baylor.
Well, again, that's part of Herb's legacy. I had the privilege of singing in the Glee Club, we called it, when I was a student here. And then, a generation later, my daughter sings for Vic Oaks in the choir, which is one of the best choirs in the United States. It's the defense of a liberal arts education, because it makes us all better people to be exposed to the arts, whether it's studio art, performing arts. It makes us better human beings.
That is an area, you talk about Baylor's growth has been more recent. That's my own personal growth in the arts has been a lot more recent through my own children and everyone else's. But it's so powerful to watch a student, similar to athletics, it's rehearse, and then that performance, what happens when you step up on the stage.
Under pressure.
Under pressure. My favorite moments, we'll come back to that in a second, my favorite moments, I say this all the time, and one of the things that I value about this position is getting to see behind the curtain, right? Like those moments you talked earlier about the talk that happens, sort of that pep talk before the curtain comes up for opening night, or before the chorus goes out and sings in front of the Pope on New Year's. This is what we did at Hammond, saying New Year's Day Mass in St. Peter's at the Vatican for the Pope, right? And that's a lot of nervous energy. That's being pushed out of your comfort zone. We perform Les Mis for 4 sold-out international audiences at the Fringe Festival
In Edinburgh.
In Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And so those moments behind the curtain, before, like that nervous energy, I think is one of the things that I get to experience that I value the most. But how the arts fully develop us as human beings is something I greatly believe in, and want to continue Baylor traditions and even maybe bring some new ones, because I think we can always, Scott and I share this in common as well. We're both very competitive, and so I'm always pushing to be the best we can be academically, athletically, and I put the arts in there as well. And you're not competing, with other people necessarily, but you are with yourself to be the best version. And so I think there's a big component there that I look forward to bringing, that love of the arts and the ability, or having seen what the value of arts can be for students for so many years now, back to Baylor.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just either fortuitous or brilliant that Herb Barks, who fought for the performing arts spaces we have, which they didn't exist when I was a student. You got academics up here, athletics right here, and at the other triangle, you've got all the arts.
Right.
And we're in a triangle, and they're all treated equally, and I think that's pretty amazing.
That is. That was another hair-raising moment right there. The triangulation,
Yes.
like perfect symmetry. I love that.
Let's talk a little bit about the Fab 44. Do y'all know what I mean when I
Oh,
say
yeah.
the Fab 44?
Absolutely.
I was a part
You were
of
part
it.
of it.
Yes.
That's 86?
It was 85 when it happened. I was class of 89. So,
Oh, okay.
so ninth grade year was
Fab
when
44. Now, the seniors, I remember clearly, fought this.
they did.
It was a hard thing to handle.
Yes.
Well, for our audience, we ought to explain what the Fab 44
Oh, yeah,
is.
well, the Fab 44 were the first girls to enter Baylor School. And we were
In the
probably
modern era.
about 600
600
students then. They were tough. They were strong young women.
So I was in the admissions office at the time, and I had been privileged to go, and maybe you were there, I don't remember, but we went on a retreat to Pine Isle, Georgia, to discuss the possibility of going co-ed. It's mostly trustees, some faculty members, some alums, and they brought in some educators from other parts of the country to talk about the value of co-education. And they took a straw poll at the end of this 2 days, and they said, let's vote whether we should go co-ed or not. So the vote was 58-3 to go co-ed, and I was one of the dissenting votes. So we get back to, because I loved Baylor just the way it was.
Sure.
I loved everything about Baylor as the school I knew. So we get back to Chattanooga after that retreat weekend, and Herb walks into my office and he goes, "You really don't want to go co-ed, do you?" And I went, "No, sir. I just love it the way it is. I don't want to risk losing it." And he said, "Well, I'm going to put you in charge of girls' admissions." And so for the next 4 weeks, I spent all my time interviewing Alexis Gary and Miriam Street and all in these amazing young women. And I walked back into Herb's office after about 2 weeks of that, and I said, I'm going to have to say I was wrong, because we'll be a better school for having them with us. Now I'm the father of 2 female graduates, and it's one of the greatest points of pride in my life that they attended Baylor School.
How did the 9th graders feel about it?
I'm going in, and everybody's wondering, how is Mage going to teach girls? Because there's just no way that's ever going to happen. Well, I walk into class. The only girl in the class, my 9th grade class, was Alexis Gary.
Yeah.
So Alexis and I are sitting there in class, and Mage asks this question, and Alexis immediately answers it, and everybody all knew, all right, it's going to be okay, right? And it's crazy to even think about now, because I agree with Scott 100%. After I graduated, and I still have a lot of the girls who are in my class as really good friends. We came back, we had a reunion this last fall. But when I came back to teach, it was fully, essentially 50-50 at the time. And I told all of my friends who still had a little bit of that carryover, said, guys, I'm just going to tell you, it's the best thing that Baylor ever did. Like, it's the best thing. I'm teaching, and everybody was worried about how, it was just, again, ignorance on our part, thinking it wouldn't be great. It's the best thing that Baylor ever did, and I think a huge strategic advantage for the school. And it's the world, last time I checked, is co-ed, and and especially now, you mentioned as a father of 2 daughters, I'm the father of 3 daughters.
2.
And you have 2, so we have, 7 daughters between the 3 of us. And, I've had, my older 2 will graduate, one has and one will graduate from Hammond. And they've had an amazing experience. But I'm also excited that I'm going to have a daughter get the opportunity to attend Baylor. And I'm just thankful to those individuals who were a part of the planning retreat that ended up making the strategic decision for Baylor to go co-ed.
I think I was on that retreat, and I think the argument was we're moving up on the 21st century.
Right.
How can you argue anything? That's it.
Right.
Look, guys, we've danced around this, but in the past 6 months, we've been living in a strange time.
Yes.
The pandemic, the economy, racial unrest. What have the last 6 months been like for two headmasters facing problems you never knew you would face?
It's been horrible. And it's been horrible for this reason. We've not been with our people. And, what we have learned very dramatically is that great education, happens together to talk about a great work of literature or to perform or to compete with people. That's all just so rich and valuable, and we have missed that. And so while there are challenging parts of our job under normal circumstances, you can always step away from a bad day and go watch a game or go see a performance, and you're just immediately filled back up. There's not been anything to fill us back up during this time.
I'll echo everything Scott said. It has certainly been challenging. I do love a challenge, but this was a little more than anybody would ask for. There have been a lot of silver linings too, I would say, and time with friends and family, having that opportunity to be reminded that schools are people places, and the relationships that we've already discussed are so vital to a school community, and you can't have that in virtual or remote settings. That Scott said, we've been talking a lot, not only the two of us, but with other heads around the country, and just kind of all figuring this out together. And for me, it's the best example of educational collaboration that I've seen, right? So many times we're fearful of collaboration because of competition and other things, but this was the best example where educators have really said, look, here's what we're trying. This is what's working for us. Right. This is what I would recommend. One of the things that's hard right now, in addition to the, being in a global pandemic, which is hard enough, but is the divisiveness and how divided our society is as a whole. And so I think about leading into where we are in this coming school year and the unknown, and I think it's not. I think it may get harder before it gets easier, but ultimately, what I learned through this is that Baylor and Hammond are people places, and we're schools built on relationships, and that's not going to change. We will get through this, and we will thrive after it's over. And we will thrive because we know that we need each other and we need to be on campus. We're not going to worry about a virtual school, right? We'll have everybody back, and we'll do a certain amount of that at Hammond and Baylor this year. I believe that's our plan. I really believe we're going to have the majority of kids on campus this year, but there are a lot of challenges associated with that. So,
as a footnote, since he doesn't have dormitory students, how are we looking for the dormitory this fall? Are we losing a lot of students, or do we know?
Well, our challenge has been getting our international kids back. So, domestically, we're going to have a strong cohort of domestic students, but we've got a lot of international kids, amazing kids coming from all over the world, and right now, probably the majority of them will start the year virtually, until they get student visas to get back to the States. So we've got plans to reintroduce them on campus at three different junctures during the course of the school year. It's going to be really, it's going to ask a lot of them and us, and yet I'm really inspired by their commitment to stay at Baylor.
Some of these new students?
Some are new, most are returning.
Yeah, at least they know what Baylor is.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's what I was about to say. They're inspired to stick with Baylor even if they don't start the year on campus with us, because they've already had that experience and know what it means, and they value it. So I think that's the biggest, that's the biggest challenge going in. I think we have a great plan once they get here.
Scott, I know you and Chris have been talking a lot. I can tell you have, but they haven't heard your conversations.
Right.
Okay? So Scott, I want you, for our patrons, to tell Chris what he needs to know when he comes to this job.
I don't have any one thing to tell him other than he's lucky. And it's hard, but he's used to hard. I mean, so he's way more than ready. It's gonna be a great pleasure to sit back and watch Baylor under Chris Angel, and I'll be there supporting him every step of the way, and I'll be there giving money to Baylor School whenever he asks.
Thank you.
Chris,
Yes.
he's left something out. What is it you want to get from him? He's hiding something from you. What do you want to know from Scott that you haven't gotten?
We have been talking quite a bit.
I know,
Shaack.
but see, they haven't heard you talking.
Okay. I've got the core of Baylor, right? I know what Baylor is about at our core.
Yeah.
And I also have been a part of the educational community over the last 18 years. And so I have a general feel for what the community and the world of education is doing. And we've stayed in contact there. And I guess knowing that you'll continue to be there once you're not going to toss me the keys and say...
Scott, he's going to call you every other day.
He won't. I mean, he won't need to. I'll be there when he does, but he won't need to, and that's the privilege and pleasure that I get in Baylor's getting Chris. This is a big, complicated place. I mean, you're talking about a school family of almost 1,300 people, and when you add our alums in, that's another 10,000. Just as Bill Stacy did for me, I will be there to help him any way I can. But I'm also stay out of his way, because he needs the freedom to be his own man here.
Sure.
So
I look forward to that and being able to maintain our relationship after he leaves.
what our two schools have, and which is really rare, is there's this deep, profound love of school from the student body, and that is my greatest point of pride about Baylor, is these kids love it. And they're different. They're from all different walks of life. You were talking about your students singing the alma mater before or after production. So I'll come back to my favorite moment. Maybe in the 11 years I've been at Baylor. So 3 years ago, we had a senior trip for the ages. It rained every day of the trip. Every day, and it didn't drizzle, it poured every single day. And we took the kids climbing every day. I went up to the climbing site one day, and we were literally climbing up waterfalls. It was miserable. I was miserable, and I love this stuff. You know, I mean, I like being in the outdoors. I like paddling and climbing. We didn't raft Section 4 because it was too high.
I've been there.
So we were we were on Section 2 and 3, and they really didn't get the whole thing. And it's the only time I've ever been on a trip like that I considered pulling the plug because of the elements. I'm a third of the way into the trip, and I'm thinking, we can't do this. I'm going to take them home. It's miserable. And then I kind of looked around, and the kids were having fun. And they were getting into things, and they were coming back from activities soaking wet, but having had fun. So the last night of the trip, I stood up and I said, I want to say to you, not as headmaster, not as your headmaster, but as a fellow alum, how proud I am of you, that you've not just participated, but you've made the best of this really miserable you know, 6 days up here in the woods. And I said, I just want to tell you I'm proud of you. They stood up on cue and sang the alma mater. I was, Arlene Burns, who's a close friend of Baylor, and she's a Hammond graduate.
Yeah.
She's a Hammond alum, and she's spoken on the senior trip forever. Arlene Burns was sitting next to me, and she was bawling. I mean, it was just one of those moments, and I'm getting chill bumps sitting here telling you, that's what's special about our school. It's part of that total experience that I think students graduate with, and that's what I'm most proud of.
Awesome story.
So.
That is. And I think that does, you know, certainly apply to, we talk about the students and how much they love it, and when I think about my experience at Baylor, like what makes it great is, in addition to students loving their school, it's the faculty and administration, everybody who wants to be here, and a lot of the people we've mentioned. And when you have that synchronicity where everyone is enjoying doing what they're doing and we're all in this together, that's what makes Baylor so great. Is you got students singing the alma mater, you got faculty who are passionate. They are going to all the games and they want to be here too. It's not just teaching and that's it, right? It's a lifestyle.
There are not many 3 o'clock teachers at Baylor.
No, well, they're I hope not. So like that's we want everybody to want to be a part of this whole experience, right? And that's what makes us great. And it's all of us working together and loving the place so much, and that passion to where, like, all right, it may be raining every day, but you know, we can do this because we've been pushed our entire Baylor experience. And sometimes as adults, we need the kids to teach us that.
That's
too,
exactly
right? And I
you
see that time and time again. We get to a point where we're like, all right, maybe we should pull the plug, and the students are just saying, no, we got this. We got this.
We've been dancing here and it's been fun, and I'm gonna let Scott have the last word because he wants to talk to you donors about the Baylor Fund once again to thank you.
To have 3 alums, and I think it's fair to say we represent, you know, different eras of Baylor, but to share the love that we have of our school. We know you feel that way too, and that it's manifested by your support of what we're doing. And I can promise you that if you could come and walk this campus and meet our students, your hearts would swell with pride, because they make us proud. They're not perfect, no different than we weren't perfect when we were here, but boy, they're really neat young people, and it's a real privilege to serve Baylor as head and be their headmaster. I'm going to be equally proud to hand the reins to Chris Angel here in a year and let him work with them as well. So thank you for your steadfast support, and we're going to count on you moving forward. This is a lifelong love affair, and we're deeply grateful. So thanks.